If you grew up watching WSFA 12 News, chances are you watched Young World, maybe even appeared on the children's show. For 15 years, the show welcomed children into the studio for puppet shows, arts and crafts, and solid life lessons. The success of Young World is often attributed to its beloved host, Marge Payne. Well, Marge is no longer with us, but her legacy, along with some of the show's favorite characters, is still living strong, with Clydetta Fulmer, who was the voice behind the puppets, and Art Williams, who appeared as a child on the show many times. These two have some incredible stories to tell about what happened behind the cameras that made Young World so magical. I'm Bethany Davis, and this is Being Real.
Sponsored by Bryan Jewelry.
When you call me, I'll answer. And if you need someone to hold your hand, when you're lonely, I'll be there. I will give you everything I am.
Promise your everything with a diamond from Bryan Jewelry.
Like Art, you could be described as probably the biggest fan in the world of Young World.
Well, I certainly loved it. I would be hesitant to say that about myself because, as we all know, there are so many people who do have fond memories of it that were either on the program or not. But it became my favorite program quickly. We moved to Brundage from Birmingham in 1982. I was 8 years old, and that's the first time I saw Young World. And I fell in love with it and immediately started writing letters to Marge Payne, the hostess, because I was a puppeteer and I loved her puppets. And so pretty soon she reached out and invited me to come and be on the program. So my first appearance was when I was 8, and she interviewed me with the puppets and then said, feel free to come back as often as you can. And my parents think we would go about every 3 months, and I would take puppets and she would just allow me to, I guess, work me in whenever in a segment or whatever to do a puppet here or there, or told a Bible story one time. But the thing that really shows, I think, how much Young World meant to me is that after returning home from being on the program the first time, I transformed my room into the set of Young World and even had paper cut lights and so forth. And I wanted to pretend that I was making the program myself.
Oh, wow.
And so my parents got a closed circuit little camera for me, a security camera, and I would close the door and pretend I was making the program for the next several years because I loved it that much.
That's incredible. Yeah, it was that she invited you into the studio. You invited us into your home because all of the memorabilia, is probably the right word, from Young World is here in your house. How did you end up with it?
Marge was near the end of her life, and I think her children realized that, and we had kept in touch in the subsequent years after the program ended. And knowing that they were starting to think about what to do with her estate, I reached out at one point and said, if there's any little something you come across as you're going through her things, I would treasure having just something. And her daughter said, well, you know, Art, Mom has actually already thought about this, and she wonders if you would like to have the puppets from Young World. And Bethany, I've had some very nice puppets in my life and very expensive ones, but I can't tell you, I mean, these are, I can't express to you how special these are to me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily financially, but just because of the memories associated with them and how much they meant to me. I mean, it just takes me back to my childhood. Remember being on that set and seeing these puppets that I love so much, and then to have them here. And it's very, very special.
Yeah, it is. Okay, well, Marge, you were the voice behind many. I'm Clydetta. you were very, very close with Marge, but you were the voice behind many of these puppets. Introduce us to who we've got here.
Here we have Granny Grits, and she was probably my favorite puppet to work with, and Redbird, and Sam Sniffle Snort was our reporter. He did the Sniffle Snort report, and Art told me that he knows somebody who is going into reporting because he always wanted to be Sam Snifflesnort. Who knew he had that influence? Barry Blue, he was usually the co-host, the male co-host puppet, and Rufus Rabbit, and Marge's puppet was Pitty Pat. She was sort of the star of the puppets.
Yes.
And, we have, Pitty Pat had a book
Oh,
of
yes.
pals. This was an old wallpaper book that Marge got for free.
Wow.
And so we used this, and in this we see a picture of Art and his letter that he first wrote when he was 8.
So that book is full of letters that
Right.
children wrote to Pitty Pat, the puppet.
There are more than 200 letters in this book that children sent pictures of themselves and told us a little bit about themselves. And I think one of the appeals of Young World was that we showcased the children and their talents and their interest, and I think that was appealing to them
Yeah.
and gave
Art-
them an opportunity to be a part of it.
Can you find your letter quickly? Did you
Sure.
write that before or after you appeared on the?
That's a good question.
I remember when they came back after he had transformed his room into a studio, they had his parents had some pictures of what he had done, and I was busy setting up for the episodes that we were going to do, and Marge called me and said, "You need to see this." And I said, "I'm busy." And she said, "But Claudetta, you need to see this." And I went, and I said, "What?" This little boy has made all this set. It was really amazing.
That is pretty neat. Can you read your letter?
I can, and so apparently I had been on the program, but it says, "Dear Pitty Pat, I am Art Williams. I watch Young World every Saturday and Sunday and enjoy it very much. I have been on the program with my puppets. My pictures have been on the art gallery, I guess.
Yeah.
And Dr. Bob, who was a regular featured doctor for medical things for the children. And I say, and Dr. Bob talked about me, love Art Williams."
Dr. Bob.
Dr.
We
Bob.
have Dr. Bob. Yes, look
We
at
had,
that.
that was one of the segments, we had a doctor come and talk about, you know, so children would be scared of getting a shot or something like
Sure.
that. And what happens when you're sick, and you're really going to get well, probably. And things like that. So he was a popular person on the,
Yes, I guess so.
And if I remember correctly, he would come from Troy, from the Child Health Care Center,
he did.
I think. That's where he worked. Such a nice man. It was a wonderful segment.
Yeah, that's really cool. And what a great way, too, to connect with you're already connecting with kids, but to really connect with them in a way that probably makes some parents feel a little comforted as well.
right.
Let's talk a little bit about Marge. Obviously, she was beloved as the host of Young World. I think is her lovely personality that made it such a success and that drew so many people to want to watch it, to want to be a part of it. But who was the Marge you knew?
Well, I knew Marge. When I first met Marge, I was asked, I'm an artist, and I was asked to teach an art course for people in the community at Huntington College. And so one of my students was Marge Payne. We had never met. I knew that she had a television show on, and I had watched it and thought it was charming. And Marge was my student, and she made a portrait sculpture of her husband, Dick Payne. And her daughter, Shelley Jones, was also a student, and she made a portrait of her husband, David Jones. Just incidentally, one of the other students in the class was Dee Nielsen, and she made a sculpture of her daughter, Beth Nielsen Chapman, who later became a famous songwriter and singer. And so I had a class and I had other students, but they were such talented people, such delightful personalities. and we all became friends, and the friendship lasted. One night, it was a night class, and one night Marge stayed after class, and we were talking, and as she worked on the portrait, and we talked about the Bible and about studying the Bible, and I invited her to come to my ladies' Bible class, and she said, well, she was really busy with this children's program. And I told her, well, I had a little experience in television from working with Roselle on the Roselle show, Roselle Fabiani in Columbus, Georgia. And I said, if I help you with your show, will you have time to come to the Bible class? And she said, well, yes. And so I helped her one time, and she saw that it was very helpful. and so arrangements were made, and I helped her for 10 years.
Wow.
But it started out with
just if I help you on this one time. But
So-
10 years, it turned into a lifelong friendship after
it
that.
did, and I'm happy to say I've maintained contact with her family, her children, her grandchildren, and now her great-grandson. So they've been a part of my life for all these 40 years, 40 plus.
But when you call me, I'll answer. And if you need someone to hold your hand, and when you're lonely, I'll be there. I will give you everything, everything I have.
Promise your everything with a diamond from Brian Jewelry.
Marge was a constant through the show.
Right.
But she went through a lot of different co-hosts.
This was sort of the training ground for
For a lot of
a lot
people.
of people.
But you got some really cool pictures here.
Yes,
That kind of tell the story of how the show evolved from one
Well, I think
co-host to the next.
Phil Snow was her first co-host, and he was a wonderful man, a great announcer, a great news person, sports person, and but he had an influence in Young World, and that was the beginning. We have a large picture here that shows Phil and
Oh, yes.
and Marge, and we were commenting about the difference in the cameras in that day and the dress, and Marge always dressed very elegantly, but her co-host also dressed up with a nice jacket, and
Yes.
we talked about whether or not for them to go more casual, but she liked the dressed up look.
So that was a discussion for a kids show, whether we should be a little more
Right.
casual for
Right.
kids or not.
And then let's see, here's another one of them in the early days. And there was Pitty Pat with them from the beginning.
Miss Pitty Pat.
When I came on the scene, her co-host was Dan Atkinson, and what a gentleman Dan was.
Oh,
He was.
yes.
I did, during this period of time, I sculpted the portrait bust of Marge that's over here. And an interesting thing happened. We did a series on how a sculpture is made. I was the art lady, and I did art projects, but I did fine art things too sometimes, did a segment with fine arts. And so we did a series on how a sculpture is made, and it won an award from the Arts and Humanities for art in the media.
Wow.
And Marge and I had worked on that program, and we went to a convention where we received the award. I was invited to go to the convention, and they had two little trophies, and one was given to Marge and one was given to Dan because he was the co-host. And he stood up and he thanked them for this honor, but he said, I want to tell you, I didn't do anything on this project, and I would like, with your permission, to give this to Claudetta Fulmer because she did the artwork. And he gave the award to me, and a lady who was in the audience said, chivalry is not dead. But But I thought, as long as Dan lived, chivalry was not
That
dead.
is
He was a
an
real
ultimate
gentleman.
yes.
And then Connor Vernon, I believe, was next. And he was, I can't remember how long he stayed. Then Don Phelps, and I don't think we have a picture of Don.
No.
But anyway, he was a host. And then the last host was Robbie Bush. Did I show Rich?
No.
Oh, we
not
skipped
yet.
Rich.
Where's Rich?
There he is.
Yeah, here he is. This is a good picture of Marge and Rich.
Would you share that story?
Oh, Rich came from radio to WSFA, and so they put him on the co-host, gave this for him for an opening thing for his learning period, I guess. And the first day we were standing there and waiting for the show to begin, and Rich said he was a little nervous because this was the first time he was on television.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, just relax and enjoy it. You'll do fine. I said, 40 years later, I think he did fine.
I think he did fine that day. I think he
He
did.
did. He got right into
Oh,
that.
yes.
But all of these, the last was Robbie Bouchelon, and here I am. That's how I looked 40 years ago.
It's just a few years ago. You
Just a
haven't
minute.
changed. Not at all.
But so he was the last host, and then the show ended in '87.
And
Yes.
Marge had an art box that she kept all of her things in, and I wanted to have one too. So
Oh,
she could
wow.
just go to this one box, and have what she needed to make the art projects.
What did you keep in your art box?
Oh, it was markers and scissors and crayons and glue, glue sticks, construction paper, anything that you
Wow.
would need. And then they would want you to have paper towel rolls and the meat trays like she's talking about. But that was one of my favorite segments, those art projects. And I loved that they were, that's right. I loved that they were not so simple that anyone could do them. I mean, there was a little bit of a challenge, but it was very attainable.
It had required a little bit of a skill.
A little bit. I
Yeah.
remember tissue paper in autumn colors was torn and put on to make a tree, the top of a tree, and the trunk was there. And see, so many of these things she did to prepare. And I imagine you came up with a lot of the projects on your own too, didn't you? Yeah.
And some were collaboration. She would say, well, why don't you put this over there and that over there? So,
And she loved to outline, you said.
oh yes. He was commenting on Rufus Rabbit's tooth and how it was outlined with magic marker. And I said, Marge was very big on outlining. She
Everything was
so
outlined.
everything
yes.
was outlined with markers. She said it would show up so much better on television and be more distinct. And so,
What did your artist eye think about that? If that's what she wanted.
that's what she wanted. That's what I'll do. But I saw that it did make it pop, and you could see it better.
Yeah.
It's more distinct.
This is such a simple thing, but I learned from her during one of those art segments that when you are cutting with scissors into a piece of paper and you cut this way, you don't want to, how did she say it? You don't want to turn your scissors and come back this way. You want to cut in twice so that you don't have to yank it apart or something. I'm not explaining it very well, but ever since I think of that when I cut, because I don't want to tear it, I want to make sure it's cut to the point,
Yes.
things like that. And she was quite an artist too, wasn't she?
She was very gifted.
Yeah.
She made a recognizable likeness of her husband when she took that course. And her grandfather was an engineer who helped Gutzen Borglum carve Mount Rushmore. And so
Wow.
she had a tradition of artists.
Yeah,
in her family.
there's a history
Yes.
there for sure, genealogy. Talk a little bit about obviously your artwork on the show was very impactful, but somewhat elementary compared to compared to what you are capable of doing and what you have done. You've made a career of your art. Speaking of elementary art.
because this was the birthday barrel, and children would send in their names, and we would draw a name each week, and then on the 4th week we would have the birthday party, children's birthdays in that month. And that was an ice cream barrel that I decorated with tissue paper and glitter, and here it is to this day. It's just amazing. I said to Art, when it was displayed in the Archives and History building, I said, if I had known that this was going to be displayed in the Archives and History, I might have spent a little more time.
Maybe so, maybe so.
And you know, Clydetta has sculpted, we were talking about this earlier, but she has sculpted so many things for so many clients, and some of them quite well known.
Yes.
And to think about that level of art, I think is what you were asking her compared to this.
Right.
And so it does make this a fun topic for us to share. Here it is again, it never goes away.
Yeah, you've done some incredible masterpieces for some really big names that a lot of people would recognize, but that's the one that ended up in a museum. Not the one probably you anticipated.
But an interesting thing, Art brought my work on Young World and me to the attention of the archives for the show on Young World. And as I was leaving, after I met with them, one said, it's very fortuitous that you came at this time because we are thinking of having some sculptures made. And they commissioned me to do 2 portrait busts, the first that they had commissioned in 30 years for their statuary hall. And I was very honored to have the opportunity to sculpt a portrait bust of Patty Ruffner Jacobs, who was the woman who was credited with getting the women of Alabama the right to vote. And then Amelia Boynton Robinson, who was an activist who got the black women registered to vote. And so they were my 2 subjects, and that was a very meaningful thing. And I thought, who knew Young World would open the door to
Isn't that amazing?
that opportunity.
Decades later,
Right.
Young World is still providing opportunities.
Right.
That's incredible. But so I think, though, that's just sort of a microcosm of what Young World still is to the people in this community. It still is impacting people, obviously.
That's wonderful to think about.
You know, it really is. It's still something. I feel like people carry a little piece of it with them on a regular basis. And when I run into people, there's always some sort of story, or you remember when Marge did this, or I remember, watching Dan Atkinson, or watching Phil Snow. But even aside from that, I feel like Young World went a little deeper. Obviously, we learned lessons about how to cut our paper, so we didn't have to tear it.
The practical.
But I think we learned some deeper lessons from Young World that are still resonating with us. What are some of the lessons you feel like you still carry with from the show today?
Kindness. Kindness. Marge once told me, during the years I was working directly with children, she said, children are drawn toward adults who are warm and encouraging and affirming and positive and gentle. And it is so true. And I think a lot of how I interact with children was greatly influenced, by seeing her and her co-hosts and how they did it. But it is true. Someone has said children can spot a phony a mile away. And it's important to be sincere and genuine with them. And I think that's huge. There was never tension. There was always the positive side of things. It was always uplifting. And you compare that to a lot of what we see these days, and I long, and I think often, how do we turn the clock back? Not in every sense, but how do we make goodness attractive again? It's easy to make evil attractive, and she knew how to make goodness attractive.
What are some of the lessons you feel like you learned from her?
Well, there's so many. She taught me to think of how things will look to other people. And I'm not saying that she not in a superficial way, but how will people be affected by what you say, what you do, and the way you present it, and what a difference it makes in the way you present something. I think I was probably more focused on the form, the essence, the creation, than how the creation is presented. And I think she brought that to my attention. And there are other lessons that she taught about seeing her interact with children that touched me and influenced me. I think mainly that.
You both have gotten a little emotional today. We remember the show and remember Marge. There's emotion there. There's obviously some really strong feelings. What is it that brings that emotion? What is it that you're remembering that?
Excuse me.
I think her goodness, and to see what she did to try to help make our area, our community, a better place. And there was a time, my understanding is that Young World was almost about to go national on the network, that there was an opportunity for that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, she was invited to or recruited to go national with a children's show, but she stayed here.
She always knew the right thing to say. It was a mystery for many, many years how old she was. And she wouldn't tell people.
Oh, really?
And so the story is that when people would say, "How old are you?" she would say, "Can you keep a secret?" And they would say, "Yes." And she would say, "So can I." And one time the three of us were in church together, and it was a very quiet part of the service. And all of a sudden a baby just screamed out. And she leaned over and whispered, and she said, "Was it something I said?"
Oh, no.
She was just such a lady, such a lady. And you couldn't help but love her. People could not help but be endeared to her. She was endearing to others.
Yeah. Just one of those lights, no matter where she was, just seemed like she was such a light. And such a, I mean, goodness, as we celebrate 70 years of WSFA 12 News, she was such a part of that history and bringing the community that we serve together as one. Young World may be one of the most beloved pieces of WSFA's history, creating some special memories for those who were a part of it and those of us who loved to watch it on TV. It was fun, it was meaningful, and every episode was real.